Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The Swedish heavyweight Otto Wallin will have a chance to re-establish himself when he faces Travis Kauffman August the 15th. So that fight, we knew it was coming. Some details of it had leaked out in recent weeks. I'd even covered it here on the channel. But this fight is now official. It's been confirmed as part of a 9-card sort of series of events from Showtime in the coming months. And I would note though, because I went through the press release and I'll get to the statement on the Wallin and Kauffman fight in a moment, there are no other heavyweight fights at this stage on those 9 cards. Most of the main events and co-features have been confirmed. There's still a few towards the back end of the schedule that haven't, but this is a co-feature to the David Benavidez versus Roma Angulo fight August 15th. But yeah, a little surprising, not more heavyweights featuring on the Showtime schedule. Perhaps some of the cards will be filled out with lower tier heavyweights, but it seems most of the higher profile heavyweights might be saved for PBC's Fox return. But the Wallin and Kauffman fight, I'll get to the statement that talks about that fight, and then onto a few thoughts, because Wallin has sort of been a bit MIA in the past year since a good effort, a losing effort to Tyson Fury. But we'll talk about it, because there is an opportunity for him to get back in the mix through this fight and sort of, build some momentum. But the press release says Wallin vs Kauffman is an intriguing heavyweight matchup between the Swedish heavyweight southpaw and the veteran Kauffman. Both fighters have survived bouts with the COVID-19 virus, made full recoveries, and are anxious to get back in the ring. The winner will undoubtedly receive another big fight. The loser will go to the back of the line in the busy heavyweight division. So maybe describing this as a big fight and also an intriguing one is perhaps stretching things a little bit. This, in my view, is a fight where Otto Wallin should win. He is good enough to win it and should win it comfortably. Travis Kauffman is a hard man. He's limited to a large extent in terms of what he does in the ring. And Otto Wallin, a skilled southpaw, and we've seen him before. He's a very good heavyweight fighter, a sort of finesse type fighter. Not a hugely powerful heavyweight, but he does have good boxing and technical ability. And this is how he's going to win this Travis Kauffman fight. So for me, this is like an 80-20 type fight that Otto Wallin should go in there and have far too much for Travis Kauffman, who won't be able to deal with the movement, and he won't be able to sort of really take too many rounds off Otto Wallin. Maybe a Hail Mary, he might be able to sort of land a few shots and perhaps win a round or two, but I would expect Otto Wallin is going to pitch close to a shutout. This is over 10 rounds. Otto Wallin, for my money, is going to win this one by decision. And I have seen a few people after the news sort of broke of this fight coming out saying that Otto Wallin will get a stoppage. I don't think I would see that happening. I think Travis Kauffman has proven in the past that he is a tough guy. He's hard to stop. Luis Ortiz fought Travis Kauffman. That was Kauffman's last fight. That was at the end of 2018. Dropped him a number of times, but couldn't get him out of there. And Ortiz certainly has far more power than Otto Wallin. But if there was to be a stoppage, I think it would be more a case of Travis Kauffman sort of retiring on his stool. And I guess, the inactivity, what sort of role has that played in his conditioning? Obviously, as well, both these guys, this is the battle of the COVID heavyweights. I guess we'll soon see, has that had any lasting impact on both of those guys? But my early pick would be Otto Wallin, wide on points to win that one. So I don't think it's going to be the most competitive fight in the world. I think Kauffman is going to give it his all, but ultimately he will come up short. But it shapes more as a showcase fight for Otto Wallin, who's really lost momentum in the past year. He's a guy that came out of the Tyson Fury fight with a lot of credit. But when you sort of think about that fight, perhaps people have sort of looked at it with a little bit of rose-tinted glasses, because the story of the fight, as Max Kellerman would say, was more about the Tyson Fury cuts. Otto Wallin was able to clip him a few times early, open up 2 cuts over that right eye, and then the rest of the fight was more about Fury trying to adapt and sort of manage those cuts and put himself in a position where he could win rounds but also sort of protect the eye to some extent and getting towards some sort of outcome in his favor, because he didn't want the fight being stopped. It could very well have been stopped, and then you would have heard Otto Wallin, lineal champion of the world, no doubt. But he was able to survive, and it was actually relatively comfortable in the end. So we saw some moments of success from Otto Wallin, but wasn't really sustained success through that fight. I think for me it was more sort of spots of success, but because a lot of people weren't expecting that, I think they've bigged up the performance from Otto Wallin maybe more than it actually deserved. I mean, his promoter has gone way overboard and talked about Otto Wallin being an elite heavyweight, that he's being welcomed into the elite ranks, that he's sort of a top 5, top 10 heavyweight, which for me, on the basis of Otto Wallin's resume, is laughable. It really is quite thin. I mean, you put that loss aside to Tyson Fury, and we have to, recognize he didn't win. It was a good performance, but he didn't win. His best win is Adrian Granat, and at that point Granat was a fringe contender. It was a domestic dust-up in Sweden. Good win for Otto Wallin, but that doesn't make him world level. And he's got more to prove here. And the fact that he's been out for a year, couldn't maximize any opportunities off that Fury fight. He really has sort of, started to drift out of sight of heavyweight fans. There were a lot of people immediately after that Fury fight who were like, yeah, I want to see Otto Wallin again. He looks like a good fighter. He didn't beat Fury, but he could probably have some good fights with some good contender level guys. So at this point for me, I can't really sort of rate Otto Wallin, much higher than top 30 based on what he's actually done in the ring, because at the end of the day, that's where it counts. It's a results-driven sport. And out of sight, out of mind, his profile has started to dip. And we can certainly speculate on the reasons why they couldn't capitalize. Perhaps they were just being too greedy. I mean, his promoter, Dimitri Salita, calling him an elite heavyweight. Perhaps they were turning down, B-side money that they thought was just too short. But ultimately, you got to do the job in the ring to get some of the bigger money in the sport. So there is an opportunity for him to build some momentum off this Kauffman fight. Go in there, look good, it's a good showcase, and then onto something else. Remembering there was talk about him versus Dillian Whyte. And I could actually foresee if Dillian Whyte gets past Alexander Povetkin and it becomes obvious that the February 2021 date for his WBC title shot, is going to get pushed out, even only by a few months, that Dillian Whyte could fight at the end of 2020, and perhaps a guy like Otto Wallin, who was previously in the Dillian Whyte mix, he might be a guy that they go, this is a risk worth taking in terms of it's a winnable fight on pay-per-view in the United Kingdom. I think Wallin sort of fits into that sort of category, similar to Oscar Rivas, where, they're a name to some extent, they've got some credibility in the division, but at the same time, they could also lose to any number of these top guys if they were thrust into it. They could make a really good B-side. So don't be surprised if we see Wallin pitched in against someone like a Whyte or of a similar level at some point, and it is a fight they're expected to lose. But Wallin, I'm sure he would fancy his chances versus Whyte with his boxing, but I think a lot of people would pick Whyte to win that one. But this one here, if he goes the rounds, I'm sure he'll be better for it. Hopefully no injuries, hopefully no ill sort of lasting effects from the virus that him and Kauffman had. This is the battle of the COVID heavyweights after all. But what do you make of this fight? Otto Wallin Travis Kauffman, August 15th. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.